What if you can win a specific Formula 1 Grand Prix just once? That means, for example, if Max Verstappen wins the Dutch Grand Prix in 2021, he's excluded from the results of every Dutch Grand Prix in the future, thus changing the race results and what the standings look like in the end. What makes this system interesting is you can either dominate one season to win one title, or be consistent to try to take multiple titles. I researched this, and here are the answers. An important note though, especially for the early years. Grand Prix racing was a thing before the birth of F1 as we know it today. However, I will only cover the Formula 1 World Championship races, not Grand Prix racing overall. Considering this, nothing changes in 1950. Nino Farina wins the title ahead of Juan Manuel Fangio. Alfa Romeo wins every race except for the Indianapolis 500, which was part of the F1 calendar back then. But since F1 drivers mostly didn't enter the Indy 500 and vice versa, it didn't affect the championship at all. In the early days of Formula 1, it was legal to change drivers during the race. The points would simply be split equally between the drivers. But what if one of the drivers has already won that Grand Prix? Since the former winner of that race did contribute to the result, I decided to disqualify both drivers. And this is why both Juan Manuel Fangio and Luigi Fagioli became the first drivers to lose a race win due to the system in France 1951. Bizarrely, Fagioli was so offended that he quit F1 on the spot. The race winner in reality ended his career with no victories. But thanks to this misfortune, Jose Froilán González and Alberto Ascari drove a new constructor to the top step of the podium, Ferrari. The duo went on to win the next races, and going into the finale, Ascari led the Argentines in the standings. Unfortunately, he suffered from the age-old Ferrari strategy. Fangio went on to win the finale and the title. Ascari did score as many points throughout the year as did Fangio, but as only 4 results counted towards the championship, the Italian had to settle for second. Going into 1952, we need another rule. You can win once in the Grand Prix, not the track. That means even though the French Grand Prix is now hosted at a different circuit, you're still banned if you have won it. This decision might sound a bit questionable, but let me ask you a philosophical question. What is a new circuit? Does alternating the layout make it a new circuit? How about adding a chicane? You see, it becomes difficult, especially with small changes. So, I decided to throw it out of the window altogether and only looked at what Grand Prix it is. Back to 1952, Alfa Romeo had left F1, Ferrari was left to dominate the series. Piero Taruffi took his first win and more podiums kept him in the championship lead. Questionably, he was benched for the Dutch round. On the other hand, Ascari won all 3 European races he entered to lead the championship. Taruffi couldn't challenge for the title at Monza, allowing Ascari to claim redemption with the 1952 title. Ferraris were once again the ones to watch in 1953 as the title went down between seasoned Luigi Vioresi and young Mike Hawthorn. Hawthorn scored points in every race, meanwhile Vioresi suffered more misfortunes. Still, as only 4 results counted towards the championship, they ended the season tied on points. So, to break the tie, we shall look at who scored better results in the 4 races. Hawthorn got first, second, and second. Vioresi, second, first, second. Now, you could argue that Hawthorn has one more podium finish while Vioresi doesn't, but the way I interpret the rules is that only these 4 results are looked at as if others don't even exist. You know what? I will simply assume that the gentlemen are willing to share the title. Both Mike Hawthorn and Luigi Vioresi are the 1953 champions. Had Fangio scored just one more point, he would have been the champion instead. Ferraris dominated again in 1954, but did get competition from Germany, Mercedes. Carl Kling took the manufacturer to victory lane on their debut and even entered the title race, despite starting the season late. Nevertheless, Hawthorne was the championship leader ahead of his new teammate Maurice Trintignant by quarter of a point, and Gonzalez not too far behind but sidelined by an injury while side questing. The three remaining men raced in Spain, Ferraris battled up front, until Trintignant's gearbox failed. Hawthorne cruised the fourth win of the year and second title, indisputably now. The 1955 season opener in Argentina was interesting, to say the least. Firstly, the race had three winners: Gonzalez, Farina, Trintignant. Secondly, 7 drivers were on the podium. And thirdly, Farina and Trintignant were simultaneously classified first and second. This set the peculiar tone for the season, as in Monaco, Stirling Moss blew up his engine in the lead and Lascari went for a literal swim in the harbour, allowing Trintignant to make it 2 out of 2. This was the last time he scored any points that year. But still, it was enough for third in the standings. Second place went to rookie Eugenio Castellotti, whose point sum consisted of 2 runner-up and 1 fifth-place finishes. That's all he needed. And the title went to rapid Mercedes driver Stirling Moss, who won his first race in Belgium and the title on home soil. The manufacturer withdrew from motorsports in wake of the Le Mans tragedy. Seasoned Jean Barras made his breakthrough in the 1956 Argentine Grand Prix, taking his maiden win in the Maserati. On the Ferrari side of things, Peter Collins took his first win in Belgium and eventually made history by becoming the first driver to take 3 in a row. Still, Barras never lost the championship lead and, as Collins faltered, took the title 1 race early. Stirling Moss's late charge carried him up to second in the standings, just 3.5 points behind. In the 7 races of 1957, excluding the 500, there were 6 race winners, 4 of them being first-timers. The title favourites, however, emerged quite early: Ferrari driver Luigi Musso and Harry Schell, whose long career so far had been, unremarkable. He did score a few podiums to go into an early lead, but Musso's 2 victories allowed the Italian to clinch the title. Despite not winning any races, Schell took second, and third somehow went to a fellow American named Maston Gregory, who entered half of the races and didn't win any of them. You might have noticed that I haven't talked about a championship for the constructors. Well, this is because it didn't exist. Until now. Introducing International Cup for Formula One manufacturers. That's what it was called back then. However, it only counts the points of the highest finishing driver and it still has the 6 races count limit. So, who won the maiden International Cup for Formula One manufacturers in 1958? First race was won by Cooper, then the defending champion for Ferrari, and then Van Wall, and then Van Wall, and then Van Wall. In a span of 8 races, Van Wall won 7 of them. Only Roy Salvadori of Cooper denied the streak, beating a Van Wall by 0.2 of a second. I think you can tell that Van Wall won the title. On the driver's side, Stirling Moss won all 5 races he could enter and the 1958 title. Surprisingly, Mike Hawthorne took second in the standings, just 1 point ahead of a Van Wall driver. In 8 races of 1959, there were 6 new race winners. The first one, Jack Brabham from Australia, created a sizable lead and thanks to his 2 wins, had twice the points of his Cooper teammate at the halfway mark. However, he suffered a series of unfortunate events and Phil Hill of Ferrari snuck barely into the title race on home soil, and the respective constructors were tied on points. The title battle didn't last very long though, as Hill suffered clutch problems early on, leaving Brabham to win the driver's title. He ran out of fuel on the last lap, but Cooper still took the Manufacturers' Cup as his teammate Bruce McLaren inherited victory. Keep that in mind. 1960 was dominated by Cooper cars, winning 6 of the first 7 races and the Manufacturers' Cup. The defending champion took 4 victories but was behind his teammate McLaren, who won the first 2 races by 4 points going into the finale. Now, the reason I asked you to remember something, the finale was hosted in the USA. Brabham led the first laps of the finale until the car was still in one piece though. It took 2 trips down the pit lane to realize that it was caused by fuel hitting the hot exhaust pipe, no biggie. The Australian then charged from the back to the field to ultimately finish third, tying McLaren on points. With 4 wins to the Kiwis 2, Brabham won his second title on countback. 1961 saw the complete domination of Ferrari. 6 wins to clinch the Manufacturers' Cup and pole positions in every race they entered. The main title contenders turned out to be German Wolfgang von Trips and American Phil Hill, who often finished within seconds of each other. Hill took 5 pole positions but converted only 1 to a victory. Meanwhile, the Germans' 3 wins put him a few points ahead. But then tragedy struck. Von Trips lost his life in Monza. Ferrari decided to withdraw from the finale, posthumously making Wolfgang von Trips the champion. 1962 started off with victories for 4 different teams, but soon after, the victories would be traded only between Jim Clark of Lotus and Graham Hill of BRM. Graham Hill was more consistent and with 2 rounds to go, 15 points ahead of Clark, who was rapid but often didn't see the checker flag. Still, the Lotus driver could take the title by winning the last 2 races. 50% of the job done in the US. He was set to make it 100% in South Africa, until he suffered an oil leak just 20 laps before the end. Hill then cruised to his 4th win of the year to not only take the title for himself, but also BRM. There was no stopping Jim Clark in 1963. From the 7 races he entered, 5 wins and 6 poles, easily securing the title. BRM was surprisingly competitive over on the manufacturer's side with Graham Hill and Richard Ginter, equally Lotus on points with 2 races to go, but Clark's one-man show was unstoppable. The racing world was struck by a surprise as Clark's rookie teammate Peter Arundel won at Monaco in 1964 and grew a sizable points lead in 4 races. Unfortunately, he suffered a Formula 2 crash, leaving him off the racetracks for the rest of the year. The new championship favourite had scored 0 points so far. Enter Lorenzo Bandini. His 3 consecutive victories behind the wheel of a Ferrari put him in the championship lead. With 3 more wins from his teammate John Surtees, Ferrari claimed the Manufacturers' Cup. Going into the finale, Ginter was 3 points behind Bandini and Surtees 2 points further. Bandini did collide with Graham Hill, allowing Surtees to take 2nd, but still scored a podium finish, and with Ginter out of points, he was crowned the champion by 2 points over his teammate. Another rookie shocked the racing world in 1965. His name was Jackie Stewart. The Scotsman took 4 victories, claiming the driver's title, 19 points over Lotus's Mike Spence, and taking BRM to the 2nd Manufacturers' Cup with all of the points coming from Stewart. 1966 was a strange season. In Monaco, just 2 drivers were classified and Stewart led his teammate by 5 laps and the 3rd place by 25 laps. In Belgium, 3 drivers classified, led by Surtees, who then departed from Ferrari after being left out of the Le Mans roster. His replacement Mike Parks, whose only F1 entry was in 1959 with a F2 car, immediately won. Germany, Brabham snaps his 6-year winning streak. Italy, Occasional F1 driver Ludovico Scarfiotti wins in front of the Tifosi, but the eventual champion, Jochen Rindt, won his first race and the title on the same day in the US, even though he didn't even take the checker flag because he ran out of fuel. There was still one more race in Mexico to decide the manufacturer's title. Ferrari, the leaders, decided not to enter to rebuild the race shop for the next season. That was a bad idea. John Surtees, now driving for Cooper, became the only repeat winner that year and claimed the Manufacturers' Cup for his new home. He also took third in the standings behind runner-up Denny Hulme in Brabham's team. Denny Hulme was the early championship leader in 1967, but his team really shined in the second half of the year when only Brabham cars won races, easily winning the Manufacturers' Cup. Hulme was also able to maintain the gap to his Ferrari rival Chris Amon to take the driver's title. Meanwhile, the team owner went from 2 points in the first half of the year to third in the final standings. Well done, Grandmaster. 1968 saw a whopping 9 winners in 9 races, from past champions in new outfits to the replacement driver of a replacement driver. The man leading the championship turned out to be Jackie Ickx in his first full F1 season. He scored 6 consecutive podiums for Ferrari and 1 win along the way. His substantial lead was dropped into danger after a nasty crash in the qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix, forcing him to miss races until the finale in Mexico. By then, Denny Hulme was on his tail, having taken 2 victories for the recently formed McLaren team. Over in the Manufacturers' Cup, BRM was ahead of Ferrari on countback, Matra 5 points behind, and Lotus in a must-win scenario. Ickx really struggled at Mexico City as he was 4 seconds off the pace in qualifying and retired early in the race. His rival qualified out front, but just a handful of laps in, he suffered a suspension failure and ended up in the barriers. Jackie Ickx was the champion. It was game over for Ferrari in the Constructors' though, as Graham Hill took a dominant victory to put Lotus in a good position. Still, as the local Pedro Rodriguez finished 4th, BRM took the title. This came despite scoring just 1 podium in the second half of the year. 1969 once again didn't have a single dominant driver as there were 6 race winners, although Jackie Stewart took 3 of them. Surprisingly, despite not having won any races for 6 years, including this one, it was Bruce McLaren leading the championship in a car bearing his name. Still, there were 5 drivers who could still snatch the title from him: Jackie Ickx, Jean-Pierre Beltoise, Jackie Stewart, Joe Sifford, and Piers Courage. To make matters worse, the Kiwi was unable to start the race due to mechanical trouble. None of the aforementioned drivers won the race, but Ickx did crucially finish in 2nd ahead of Stewart to claim his 2nd title, just 3 points ahead of McLaren. This also meant that Brabham beat Matra to the Manufacturers' Cup. Had Stewart beaten Ickx in the race, both titles would have gone his way instead. 1970 was a tragic year. Bruce McLaren snapped his 7-year winner streak in what turned out to be his last race before passing away. Jochen Rindt, on the other hand, dominated the season with Lotus, taking 5 victories with 4 of them coming consecutively before a fatal crash at Monza. This left Clay Regazzoni as the only challenger. The man from Switzerland missed 5 races early in the season as he was busy with Formula 2 duties before Ferrari expanded their operations mid-season. Anyway, after his maiden win in Italy, he had 3 races to score 20 points. It turned out unachievable after a finish out of points in the USA, posthumously making Jochen Rindt a 2-time champion. Additionally, the Austrian's replacement Emerson Fittipaldi won the race, making Lotus the Manufacturers' Cup winner. Regazzoni eventually was 5 points away from being an F1 and F2 champion in the same year. Meanwhile, Ferrari lost to Lotus by 2 points. Jackie Ickx took 2 victories early in the year, but only either retired or was disallowed to race for the rest of the year. Still, he was overtaken in the standings with only 3 races to go. It was young Ronnie Peterson taking 2 victories with March and a handful of podiums to clinch the title 1 race early. Over on the manufacturer's side, Ferrari's massive margin early on turned into the closest battle in the history of the sport. In the finale at Watkins Glen, Tyrrell's Francois Savard won to take second in the standings, ahead of Siffert's BRM in second, Peterson's March in third, and Regazzoni's Ferrari in fifth. This meant that Tyrrell was able to defeat Ferrari on countback, Tyrrell having taken 4 wins to the Scuderia's 3. To make matters even closer, March was just 1 point behind, meanwhile BRM missed out by 2 points. Emerson Fittipaldi was unbeatable in 1972. Record-breaking 6 wins led to the title 3 rounds early. Lotus also happened to win the Constructors' title with 100% of the points coming from Fittipaldi. Lotus was on fire in 1973. Their new recruit Ronnie Peterson took a whopping 9 pole positions, but had just 3 wins after not scoring on 8 occasions. Emerson Fittipaldi, on the other hand, had just 1 pole position but 4 race wins. The duo's 7 wins took Lotus to the 4th Constructors' title. But still, the Lotus duo was beaten to the driver's title by a Frenchman in Tyrrell, Francois Savard. Tragically, he was killed in a crash at the season's end, where he had won 2 years prior. As if Peterson's record wasn't enough, Niki Lauda started first on 10 occasions in 1974, but was left with 4 victories after a ton and a half of bad luck. Engine failure right after a front row start in Brazil, another engine failure from second in South Africa, another engine failure from the lead in Monaco, gearbox failure from fourth in Sweden, a late puncture in Great Britain dropping him from the lead to fourth, lap 1 crash in Germany with his starter rival who went on to win the race, another engine failure from second place on home turf, a water leak from the lead in Italy, a late crash from the lead after running over debris in Canada, and a suspension failure in the finale. Now, fair enough, others suffered reliability concerns too, but not quite on Lauda's level. All of this allowed Jody Scheckter of Tyrrell to claim the title. Coincidentally, his 5 victories all came from the races where Lauda had problems in the lead. After Lauda's teammate Regazzoni struggled with the car in the finale, Tyrrell also claimed the manufacturer's title. With a total of 3 victories from Carlos Reutemann and Carlos Pace, Brabham regained its status as the Constructors' Champion in 1975. However, going into the finale, Reutemann was behind 3-time race winner James Hunt driving for Hesketh, and level on points with Niki Lauda. But Lauda had a trick up his sleeve. Unlike the other 2, he wasn't banned from the finale in the USA. With his 4th pole in a row and 4th win of the season, the Austrian went on to take the driver's title, surprisingly scoring in every race he entered. The 1976 driver's title race went down between last year's runner-up James Hunt, Navi McLaren, and Patrick Depailler driving the 6-wheel Tyrrell. Hunt was the faster man on Saturdays, but Sundays were compromised by mechanical failures and driver errors. Nevertheless, he was leading the championship with 3 victories after successfully overturning a disqualification in Spain. He wasn't so lucky on home soil though. 2 months after the race, he was stripped of the win, suddenly dropping him 13 points behind the Frenchman with 2 rounds to go in the Hunt season. Depailler eventually sealed the title, having taken 3 consecutive victories earlier on. Let's talk about Ferraris for a moment though. Lauda and Regazzoni triumphed 3 times each, but weren't able to contend for the title. However, they did make up a strong point sum to keep the Italian team in the championship lead all year long, except for the last race. Depailler scored a 2nd place finish, making Tyrrell a 3-time Constructors' Champion. The 1977 season went down between Carlos Reutemann of Ferrari and Mario Andretti of Lotus. Reutemann was more anonymous as he took 2 wins, meanwhile Andretti was more spectacular. 6 poles, 5 wins, and a lot of engine failures, causing retirements from 4 consecutive races at some point. Luckily for him, Reutemann also suffered problems late in the year. Crash into by Andretti's teammate at Zandvoort, a spin on an oil leak in Monza, and a mechanical failure in Canada to allow Andretti to become the first American Formula One champion. With one more victory from his teammate Gunnar Nilsson, Lotus took the constructors' title number 5. Lotus remained as the dominant force with the ground effect cars in 1978 to claim yet another constructors' title. 7 victories, 10 pole positions. Ironically, their best result in 2 races was a D&Q from a customer team. Meanwhile, the factory drivers Andretti and Peterson were banned from several races. This also allowed Brabham's John Watson to join the Lotus men in the title battle, the trio being in a 3-way tie with 5 races to go. This eventually became a dual-horse race after Peterson passed away at Monza. With Watson 4 points ahead, the fight culminated in a Canadian finale with a collision between the rivals while battling for 4th place. Watson retired a few laps later with another incident. Meanwhile, Andretti was left to charge through the field. He could only finish 9th. John Watson was the champion. His 3 victories were enough to keep the Lotus duo at bay. Renault was rapid in the sophomore F1 season, taking more pole positions than any other team. Unfortunately, they hadn't discovered reliability yet. This left Jacques Laffite of Ligier and Gilles Villeneuve of Ferrari to battle it out. They often traded the championship lead, but in the end, Villeneuve stayed on top. With 5 victories, he ended the season 16 points clear of Laffite. Mid-season, Williams suddenly became competitive with Alan Jones and Regazzoni taking them to a 3-way constructors title fight at Watkins Glen. However, with Villeneuve winning, Ferrari took their first constructors title in 15 years. Meanwhile, Ligiers and Regazzoni were forced to retire with spins and accidents. Renault was fast once again, and the René Arnoux even led the championship early. Unfortunately, they hadn't discovered reliability yet. Thus, Alan Jones took over with 3 victories before running into the wall of being banned from 5 of the last 6 races. Quite a consistent Brazilian Nelson Piquet took advantage and was crowned the champion 2 races early. His 3 wins and 5 additional podiums creating an 18-point cushion. His Brabham teammate was kinda useless, so it wasn't that easy to win over there. Somehow, Brabham did take the lead late in the season, but as Piquet had accidents in the last 2 races and Williams was unable to respond, the title went to Ligier. The French team with French drivers ended the season 13 points ahead of Brabham. Once again, it was Jones versus Piquet in 1981 until, you guessed it, Jones faced the wall of being excluded from 6 of the last 8 races. Piquet then ran away with the title until he started hearing Renault engines. No, not exploding, but getting closer. It was Alain Prost, whose 3 victories tied the Brazilian on points with 2 races to go. In addition, Williams had been caught up by Brabham and Renault in the constructors' standings going into the finale. Fortunately, Alan Jones won the finale, securing Williams' first constructors' title. It was quite intense behind them as exhausted Piquet was running in 5th, meanwhile Prost was 2nd, but being chased down by 3rd place. Would the Renault hang on? Would Prost crucially finish 2nd? Yes, he finished 0.4 seconds ahead of 3rd place and became the world champion by 1 point. Renault still hadn't really discovered reliability as Prost finished only 6 times out of 15, but his podiums made it enough. Surprisingly, Jones was just 4 points behind. Meanwhile, Renault was also able to beat Brabham on a tiebreaker for second in the constructors' standings. 1982 was eventful. Prost won the first two races, but finished on just 3 of 14 remaining occasions due to crashes and the car's unreliability. Thus, Watson took over with McLaren, but was defeated by race bans and a lack of pace. The next leader was Didier Pironi of Ferrari, but he suffered a career-ending crash in Germany. At the Swiss Grand Prix held in France, it was Keke Rosberg of Williams who triumphed for the first time in his career, led the championship for the first time, and was crowned the champion 2 races early, all in one day. He eventually ended the season 8 points ahead of Pironi. Despite Villeneuve's and Pironi's crashes and not replacing them for multiple rounds, Ferrari still took the title, 16 points ahead of Williams. Piquet got off to a great start to 1983, leading the standings until race 11 of 15, when it suddenly became a four-way battle featuring Prost and the Ferraris of Arnoux and Patrick Tambay. They were separated by 5 points with the last pair of races remaining. In the end, Piquet beat Prost by 6 points to claim his second title 3 years after the first one. He scored 3 victories that year and never finished worse than fourth. The Ferrari duo had to settle for third and fourth in the standings, but the strong points tally did charge the Italian team to the Constructors' Championship. Elio De Angelis of Lotus was a surprise favourite for the 1984 title. He scored 8 podiums, never finished lower than 5th, but scored no victories. His main rival was Renault's Derek Warwick, who didn't get quite close enough in the end. But in the final 2 races, the championship was turned upside down. Alain Prost made up a 13-point deficit to take his second title. With 5 victories, he ended the season 4.5 points ahead of De Angelis. The Frenchman's charge also meant that McLaren beat Lotus to the Constructors' title. Surprisingly, it was McLaren's first championship. Michele Alboreto of Ferrari had an incredible 1985. 5 victories and every finish being second or higher. Still, the title didn't come so easily because of Ayrton Senna, who took 4 consecutive victories late in the season. Nevertheless, Senna suffered enough engine troubles, crashes, and fuel strategy blunders throughout the year to make Alboreto the champion. This came despite scoring no points in the last 5 races. Ferrari also defeated Lotus for the Constructors' title by 3 points. This meant that both Ferrari and Lotus now had 6 titles. Senna looked to claim redemption in 1986 and did start off well, only to be beaten by his last year's teammate Nigel Mansell. 6 wins, 12 points finishes, 21 points above Senna. On the same day as Mansell, his team Williams sealed the Constructors' title 2 races early. They ended with a hefty 50-point margin to Lotus. Williams clearly had the fastest car in 1987, with Mansell and Piquet racking up a total of 10 pole positions and 6 wins, en route to the second successive Constructors' title for Williams. Neither ended up taking the driver's title. Mansell was especially unlucky. He suffered an injury while being within striking distance. Instead, Stefan Johansson of McLaren was the driver to beat. Ironically, he was a terrible qualifier, but did take 3 wins and led the championship after every single race, except for the last one. Gerhard Berger took all of his 4 wins in the final 6 races, charging him to the title. 18 points was the deficit after a string of retirements, and the Austrian still beat Johansson by 3 points. In 1988, McLaren was so dominant that they scored all the points they could, winning all the races they entered, and in case both cars entered, with a 1-2 finish. But because Prost and Senna were excluded from so many races, they were out of the title race quite early. Instead, the 3 remaining contenders were as follows: Terry Boutsen of Benetton, Derek Warwick of Arrows, and Ivan Capelli of March. Boatswain was a level above the underdogs and claimed the title one race early. He took just 2 victories, meanwhile Senna took 5 but was once again the runner-up. With Alessandro Nannini in the other car, Benetton also took the constructors' title, beating McLaren by 1 point. Some news did come after the season had concluded. Benetton was stripped of a 1-2 finish in Belgium for irregular fuel. It meant 3 things. First, Boatswain now had 1 victory, while Capelli had 2. Secondly, Benetton lost the constructors' title to McLaren, an 8-time winner this year. And thirdly, Boatswain is now tied on points with Senna. Senna's 5 wins outweigh Boatswain's 1, finally making the Brazilian the champion despite entering just 6 races. 1989 went down between Benetton's Nannini and Williams' duo of Boatswain and Riccardo Patrese. All 3 drivers never finished a race together, except for the last 2 rounds where they filled the entire podium. But by winning the last race, Boatswain claimed redemption for his painful loss last year, beating Patrese by 1 point and Nannini by 2 points. This also meant that Williams took the constructors' title, Boatswain scoring 4 victories and Patrese 1. Shout out to some of the underdogs that year. Stefano Modena winning in Monaco with the underfunded Brabham machinery. Pierluigi Martini taking 2 pole positions in a Minardi, and Stefan Johansson winning at Portugal with Onyx. He did not pre-qualify for 7 races that year. The contenders were more or less the same in 1990, except Jean Alesi was in the mix too with Tyrrell. He had a superb start but couldn't keep it up, leaving last year's trio to battle again. This time, Boatswain took 3 victories en route to his second title, once again beating Patrese and Nannini, this time with a bit of more comfortable margin. Williams took their 5th constructors title, although Benetton put up a fight in the end with Nannini and BK behind the wheel. Had Boatswain scored just 1 more point 2 years prior, he would be the first 3-time champion by now. And with this hypothetical in our minds, it's time to wait for the end of August 2026, by when I'm planning to upload part 2 of this video. To increase your probability of coming across it, I highly suggest subscribing to this channel, although liking the video also helps. All of this is also super beneficial for myself, and any feedback is greatly appreciated. But as always, thank you very much for watching and stay tuned.